Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've got one of our sponsors on today, a new sponsor, in fact, and they've got quite a great project, and we got lots to talk about today. So I'd like to welcome Gilbert Clark on the show from Meridian Mining. I forgot to name the company there, Gilbert.
You're right. Yeah. Hi, Allan. Thank you for having me on the show today and the podcast. I'm very happy to be here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I should say we've had a few really surprising progressive stuff coming out of the company over the last couple of weeks, and it's good to talk about them since we last caught up.
Yeah, you've got a new addition to your team, which is an important one. And then there's a website or platform out there called Verify that makes it really easy to upload all your geological data, and people can work with that and look at it. And we wanted to talk about that today. So lots to talk about, Gilbert.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when it was the 30th of October, we announced that Bruce McLeod has joined the board as chairman of the board. Has joined the company, I should say. Absolutely, I couldn't say what a perfect timing, perfect appointment for the stage of the company where we hope to go to in the future. We brought on a known, successful mine-building executive to lead the board of Meridian Mining, and it wasn't just something we just bring up the phone and say, "G'day, Bruce. How about you come on the board?" It was months of due diligence on his part. He wanted to know what we were doing. He wanted to understand the project, meet the team, meet the executive, meet some of the Brazilian managers as well. So it was really what I think is going to be what I've always said, and what I hope the market is now seeing. We very much are a company with a very sound leadership at the board, strong management to deliver and grow the Cavasal project through to production.
And Bruce has quite a career in the business. I know that he comes from I think it's the second or third generation of miners, and in fact, the reason that I named my company Rocks and Stocks News is years ago, I remember his sister, Catherine McLeod Seltzer, saying that they used to sit by the family table and talk about rocks and stocks. So that's the genesis of my company name. But yeah, I've followed Bruce's career for many years. He's a very talented at building mines and also selling companies. And so I think he gives you good advice, whichever direction you want to go, whether that would be to build a mine here or possibly do a deal in the future with a bigger company.
Yeah, look, it's all stages and all aspects of a small cap mining junior, and then taking that small cap junior to the next stage, be it production, to mid-tier production, mid-tier transaction. Bruce has been there, done that, and seen that. So he's been around as you say, around the tracks in Australia. He understands what goes on in the markets, how the markets change, they grow, they go upwards, downwards, sideways. But the focus always is to deliver shareholder growth to demonstrate shareholder growth.
Right, and done it before, and I do know about the thorough analysis that they do, the family does, and Bruce does, before he would jump into such a position. But this comes on the back of his Sabina being bought out, and now he's ready for another venture, I guess.
Yeah, Bruce has gone from one extreme of a pretty cold place in winter to a place there's no winter. Geographically, North and South America, I think he's experienced in all aspects of a company's development. And he's actually had previous experience in Brazil, which is a big tick for us. But Sabina Gold and Silver was a sensational takeout, I think from memory, 1.2 billion by BT Gold Corp. That mine is going to be going for a long time, great grades. And it's very much how I see the evolution and the guidance Bruce is bringing to the company on the development and building of the Cabasal project.
Quite an impressive project you have there. What initially got me attracted is the spectacular internal rate of return, the low capex to bring it into production, and because of that high IRR, a very quick payback of the capex, and so it would also have a low OPEX. When I looked at all those things combined, and then you also added some wrinkles for me in that, you put in your presentation all of the major mining companies that are involved in Brazil and how easy it is to work in Brazil. That ticked all the boxes for me, Gilbert.
I think, Alan, one of the aspects, well, I've talked about this a lot with our shareholders, is our Brazilian management team are experienced and they guide so much of the Cabasal project. You can see this in how we roll out our permitting, the strong environmental management that we do, the technical execution at the project level. And I can say this, it's easy for us because this team's been together for so long. We didn't have to create a team and see how it worked. But also, what I like about Brazil, and I can't stress this strong enough, is the integration and the workability of their legislations, be it environmental, health and safety, mining. These things come together, and it's because Brazil's got such a diverse economic base, manufacturing, banking, tourism, agriculture, mining. The mining industry doesn't have to be pillaged for profits like we've seen recently in a couple of other countries in South and Central America.
Evidence of that is often a good way to look at it is you look at the companies, the major mining companies that are involved in any country, is often a good indicator of what you just talked about.
Well, you've got all of the big three are in town. You've got Rio, BHP, Vale. Vale's absolutely giant of a company. And then we've got really strong companies coming in afterwards. And we saw the Lundin Group came in recently. Anglo American are there. And some of the local companies are very active. But again, it's what I think grows that interest and that stability of the mining industry. And I talk about this with other executives around the world, is that we have a very active, in Brazil, a very active tertiary education. So we have access to geologists, biologists, metallurgists, engineers,
Researchers,
civil engineers,
paper writing.
Yeah. You can't build mines without people. You've got to have good people, and you've got to have this flow of exchange of experience from the young to the old. And this is what we're seeing in Brazil. And this is why it's become such a dominant powerhouse in South America. Great education.
Well, I'm always a geek for data and geology, having spent 30 years in the exploration business and watching development and mining. I always love to see the data, what really makes things get exciting. And you're now sharing you're about to share the Verify model.
Tell me it's come up.
There it is.
There it is.
Okay. So go ahead and I'll ask a few questions along the way, Gilbert.
Well, look, the first thing I'll just take away from this panoramic, that's actually Fred, our geological manager, is look at the topography. Okay, we've got this central hill, and that's the Cabasal deposit. And then look around left and right. It's just pastoral land. We're not in the Amazon jungle. We're not in sensitive environmental areas. This is essentially a brownfields mining district restarting after being in hibernation just for being hidden away in a public private code for 20 years. So look, it's just open, very much open pastoral land. On the top left, the escarpment, that's barren rock for us. But this ridge is where we expect, and subsequent to the full course of environmental and technical and financial studies, that's where we'll think the open pit will start. I'm going to bring this up. It's just the cautionary statement. Always, people, investors, stakeholders, interested people, read the disclosure, see who's behind the company. This is quite an important document. What touched on before, Allan, absolutely spot on. We've got a great NPV, $573 million USD, post-tax IRR 58.4, low capex. Capex intensity, we've really maximized the use of manufacturing goods out of Brazil. We don't have that big income import tax duty because of that. And look at what we're using. We're using, the payback just under 11 months. But one of the other things that a lot of companies don't use, but actually some are starting to use it, which is good, is we're using 5-year banking consensus for our commodity numbers. We're not trying to, projected at 2,300 US dollars an ounce or $14,000 a ton of copper. What's the banking consensus? Be conservative, because if it doesn't work on conservative numbers, it's not going to work. But just on the project overview, what we can see is this is our tenements in the Cabasal project. You can see Allan, over here on the right-hand side, the Cabasal main focus at the VMS belt. We actually have 2 other greenstone belts, which is just as prospective for base and precious metals that we're actually growing our tenements there. If I just look at the Cabasal project, how it sort of come together, this is what the farming agreement's based on. It's these concentration of tenements here in the yellow outline. Within that, we have this historical wealth of data. And when people go to the website, they can actually click on this verify link, work through it, and see what we're seeing. Each of the square blocks there, that's the project ID. It's an exploration target. So this is what we call the mine corridor. Sort of goes from
Gilbert, is that a structure that goes along the eastern edge of your claim blocks that is the geology?
Yes, it's an escarpment. Basically, it's a sandstone plateau that's overlying the VMS host sediments.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a thrust. It looks to be a thrust, but it could be. There's only 2 types of rock, Barry, or waste, and that one's waste. That's how I see it. But this mine corridor, what we look at here is this 11 kilometer, which comes from Santa Rita down to St. Helena. This is where we're going to focus all our energy on. This is really what we think is the next 20-30 years of exploration and production development coming out of Cabasal. It's already defined. It's low risk for us. This data, this is the airborne EM, electromagnetic survey. This is the conductivity of magnetics. You can see how this, I think it's probably related to a Gabbro, the magnetic high. Agent could kill me for that if I get it wrong. But you can see this central trend that goes down the center of the tenements, this high. Doesn't mean it's or what it is, it's a magnetic high. That's a target to actually follow up on. Can you see this one okay, Barry?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. A bunch of
okay, so what? Yeah, drill pads. So what we're looking at here is we're standing at the edge of the northwest extension. So if you can imagine it, you're looking down to the southeast, and that's or where the prospective open pit's going to be. It's so where we envisage the processing plant B would be over on the right-hand side on the flat ground. That's where we envisage the processing plant to be. So this hill will be mined out and just transported downhill to the plant. What you can also see on the left-hand side of the screen is the escarpment, which we just talked about. And there's a small lake there. That's actually the old tailings dam from the underground mine. And what happened there, it's been discharged, rehabilitated, there's no liability on it. It's one of the only few places in Brazil where a mine has been completely historical mine. It's been completely discharged of its environmental and mining liabilities. So we're going to the central part of the campus.
By the way, Gilbert, this Verify does a wonderful job of being investors get the idea. You know, you talk about this stuff in a news release, and yes, you can wrap your head around it, but seeing it is a much different story, and do a fantastic job for you guys.
It's a matter for interactive work by an investor or a shareholder. This is just a fantastic tool. But if you look across, let's look further to the southeast. Just nothing but pastoral land. We're not trying to clear virgin rainforest like they do up in the Amazon. What we're looking at here is essentially almost savanna, going for kilometers and kilometers to the south. The closest town.
And your geophysical anomaly that is important for exploration runs right beside that escarpment there.
Yep, all the way down. And the closest towns, so there's no communities here. The closest town, Alva Batanga, and also San Jose Catamarcos, they're about 25, 30 kilometers away. What we can't see from this, just purely because of the resolution, is we've actually got 2 access easements for power already to site. A lot of companies are going to, they've got to construct hundreds of kilometers of power lines, and they've got to get that easement permitted. Ours is already there. All we have to do is upgrade the lines. What I will do is I'm just going to swing this to the right very slowly. What this is, we're looking almost to the south, and there's I can actually draw on it, and people will get cross on me with it. I'm going to do it. Just along here, Alan, can you see that? The blue line? That's actually the airstrip that was created by BP Minerals back in the 1980s. They used to fly their gold out. We'll be doing the same.
Wow.
We've also got our own bridges in place, concrete bridges, very important in Brazil. So the infrastructure, that legacy infrastructure, that capital cost, we don't have to carry. We'll have to resheet the runway, but to actually cut it out of the hill, flatten it, that capital cost is not going into our financial statements.
And all of these things are why you have or contribute to a low capex.
Yes, absolutely. We have one bridge to upgrade. We'll do that with prefabricated concrete. That's included in the capex. The other access, the bridges are already concrete. So this is important, that these legacy investments in infrastructure we're going to benefit from.
Big time.
So we go down.
You don't have to build it's not like you have to fly everything in and build roads and build towns. It's quite incredible, actually, Gilbert.
Well, I think we're about 25, 30 kilometers to Alpha Batanga. That's then a sealed bitumen road all the way down to a town called Rondonópolis, where there's a rail heading, and that goes straight to the port of Santos. So this part of Brazil is actually very well serviced with that infrastructure because it's such a large agriculture, for beef, but soybean. This is actually it's quite interesting. If you can imagine 40, 50 meters below that drill rig, which is in the foreground there, that's where the old underground gold mine was, copper gold mine. And this area through here was drilled out anywhere from 12 by 12 to 12 by 20 meter spacings with vertical drilling. And this is, say, to go all the way back up to the crest of the hill, up the top there where we looked at before, that's about 1.3, 1.2 kilometers. That's all going out as an open pit.
Wow.
This isn't some sort of small development. This is a major open pit coming into production, and we're very, very fortunate that we've been able to finance this quite successfully. We've got great shareholders, long-only shareholders. There's trading in the stock of always, but this is where the investors' money has been going into drilling out this deposit, testing the exploration upside, which is always very important to show longevity.
You've mentioned a couple times about the historical mining, and I find that quite interesting because your VMS deposit also has, I don't know, secondary enrichment of gold. And that's what they were mining back then. And that gets me kind of excited because it juices up your VMS, but then it also has potential deeper of where did that gold come from?
Well, underlying this entire belt, there's an intrusive rock called a tonalite. We're pretty certain that was the later stage heat source for the gold. It wasn't a remobilization, it was a second enrichment of gold. And if you can imagine, they drilled all of this out vertically. Doesn't really help you when you've got vertical gold veins overcutting a flat-lying VMS. And those vertical structures, those sub-vertical structures, they go all the way up to the top of the hill there. And we probably think they continue. And we know that that intrusive event goes all the way down past Santolina. So it's a very large metallogenic system. It's a very rich metallogenic
And that's sort of why your game plan changed from the historical drilling was looking for vertical bodies like this. And if you drill a vertical hole and you're right beside something, you're going to miss it. So you guys are going in there with angled holes to better understand that secondary enrichment of gold, right?
Yes, and it creates very good value rock, high value rock. Most importantly, what it hasn't done, this is again what's impacted the capex and the opex, is the metallurgy in this project is just unbelievable. It's soft, medium soft. It drops out in the gravity circuit. It floats. We put a video out, I think just this week, on Twitter on the flotation that comes from the refining. The flow sheet is we crush, we put it through a cyclone, take out some gold, and then we float it. But this almost self floats. And what people look at that video on our Twitter feed is how stable the bubbles are, and that's a key. Okay, those bubbles are chalcopyrite with gold and silver, just floating up very quickly and very stably. That's actually quite important for us. The other aspect of where we've invested our shareholders' money in these were the old mine buildings when the Capasal mine was in operations in the 1980s. And of course, when we arrived, all that was left were the walls. There was no windows, there was no roof, there's no power. All that had been stripped out. But it gave us this fantastic base. So if you can imagine the first building on the right at the bottom is actually our core logging shed. And the sheds that are behind it, the 1, 2, 3, 4 sheds you can see. The middle one, the long one, is actually our canteen. The rest of them are actually core sheds storing it. And as all of our shareholders know, we're quite thrifty. All of those rooms are going to be demountable because the pit will come down just behind those trees there, and then you're within the fly rock range from the open pit. But certainly what we're looking at is minimizing, taking advantage of this historical infrastructure at very reasonable cost, bringing it up into a camp that some of the mid-tiers will be actually jealous of at a cost of just peanuts.
And often that kind of situation in a remote camp would cost in the millions.
Absolutely. And a lot of this material we actually source from local suppliers. They've actually, these are farm shed roofs, so we don't have to actually import this stuff from, and truck it in or ship it in. Or we have to truck it in, but we don't have to ship it in thousands of kilometers.
And that's going to be a benefit to, your community outreach that, we want to use what we can from the local vendors.
Exactly.
Right, gotcha. Okay.
So look, what we're looking at is the open pit from the March of this year, PEA. It's a big pit. We've taken an absolute opportunity here to minimise the trucking distance. With like I said, the mill will be located just down here on the bottom left of the page. This is all the drilling, historical drilling at a 0.3 gold equivalent. We're doing repeatability testing at the moment on the of the ore of Cabassal. We're also looking at that sub 0.3 because that is mineralization, and seeing how we can improve that recovery, because we always have lower grade material within the medium to high grade zones. If they actually has a higher recovery, it increases the metal that we will recover.
Oh wow, that's your drilling.
And this is a combination. You can see where they drilled out on the right hand side there in the center, that massive density of underground drilling. Actually, the underground mine drilling, most of it was from the surface. You can see all of our angled holes. It basically just went to the edges of the just drilled angled holes. The red color is just a simple highlight of where we've put out some quite spectacular holes. Looking down the southeast, this is really the copper-rich zone of the deposits, increasing copper from the northwest to the southeast. We see that great hole, 240, 34 meters, 1.7 gold, 4% copper. That 34 meters that was never mined because there was too much copper in the system, so they had to stop the mine. If I look up to the northwest extension, we just move the screen up to there. We can see,
as you're doing all this, when it comes to exploration, Gilbert, I think that it's a treasure hunting event, and I think that sometimes the industry could do a better job of explaining what that treasure hunt is all about. But sometimes we hear of the Lassonde curve, and in between there is the development discount window.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes in the past, it hasn't been able to be brought to life what's happening during that process. But what you're doing here on Verify really brings to life what you're doing in that development window.
Well, I think you've hit it spot on the head. Like, exploration is high risk, high reward. Okay. And it's paid for by expensive equity. What we see at Cabassal is the first wave of very high risk, expensive equity investment along the belt we're benefiting from. So we actually, when we hit, I guess the analogy of the Lassonde curve is when we published CD49, we just shot up, obviously, 70, 80, 90, $1.20. CD49, it was a fantastic hole, 53 meters at 10 grams gold with a high grade core, 26 meters at 21 grams gold, 0.2 copper. That's all recoverable. And then what we're seeing now is that analogy of the Lassonde curve. We came off as the markets come off, the commodity prices have somewhat cooled, and now we're going to the next phase. And this is why we attract a lot of long-only investors, a lot of long-only funds, because they know this curve and they understand the growth of these potential. I've always got to say potential.
Another thing they know, Gilbert, is just how few companies are in that curve. and we need a lot more, but the pickings are slim, as they say.
Well, I was in LME in London for LME week 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now. It's gone so quickly, and a lot of the teams that I spent time with, also the commodity guys I spoke with, when they look at copper, it's just going to hit a wall after 2025. It's going to bang. Supply is just not going to be there. And although we report a gold equivalent as per our QP's instruction, 80% of the potential revenue from this mine comes from the sale of very, very advantageous copper concentrates. So this is really quite key for us. But when you look at that, you think, we're looking at this plan view. When you look at the long section, people understand this is not a discontinuous ore body. This is a massive mineralized.
Very continuous.
Yeah, and it's not a selective mining operation. We're not going to come through and try and mine 2 meters of this high grade and then we'll stop. This is bulk mining. This is not bulk mining, say, one of the great gold mines like Telfer or the Super Pit. This is when you come through with, I guess, 100-ton Hitachi or Liebherr diggers or Komatsu diggers, whatever you do, you're going to put it into the very ubiquitous 40-ton Brazilian mine trucks, but you're going to mine it as a mass. You'll have low grade, ROM grade, high grade. That's what you're going to have. And you'll take that and you'll blend that into the mill to get a consistent feed into the mill, and you'll just keep producing for and the current model over 2 decades.
And what is readily apparent there is continuity. And whether you're looking at open pit or underground, continuity is king. We often hear grade is king, but actually it's continuity that makes mines.
I'd also throw in a third one there. That's metallurgical continuity. If you've got high variability in your geochemistry, your mineralogy, it's an absolute, the mill boss will be tearing it up. But this is what we're looking at here. This is the very northwest. Just the red is just a selection of holes we talked about: 205, CD 49, CD 75. Concentration of very high grade in a localized area at the top of the hill generates for us that very interesting economics of shallow starter pits. And then, when we talk about year one for Cabasal, of course, we've got the obvious one at the northwest extension. This is year one pits. They're 3 little pits. I think people like to, when we look at this diagram, is to remember that since this resource figure, that was August of last year, we've actually identified other areas, up-dip areas, that were initially classified as waste because they just didn't have any data. We've been populating areas with data, so it's going to become even more robust. This is just the high grade. This is the plus 2.5 gram dirt. But how big? So after year 5, approximately that's about 2 pits or three pits there, probably about a half a kilometer apart, 1.5 kilometer length either side. By year 5, start to get reach its full dimensions.
Wow.
That's
and by now you've paid off your capex.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
There's a reason mining companies should and will generate lots of dividends because of things like this. If we look at this at the entire pit, but a 1 gram cutoff, what's above 1 gram, you can actually see how continuous these very robust. The gold equivalent, okay. So when we talk about gold equivalent,
that's something that stood out to me in your presentation as well, is that when you add a higher cutoff grade, it doesn't affect the body very much.
No, what draws down a pit is the high grade, the massive economic mineralization. That's what draws down the pit and expands the top of the pit patterns. But you can see when I actually go down and say half a gram, all of a sudden you see this massive mineralization appearing. It's very large. It's not spotty, it's large. And of course, this resource was heavily influenced by the historical vertical drilling. Now, when we look at what was used in the optimization, the 0.3 grams per ton cutoff and gold equivalent, that's after metallurgical recoveries, you just see a massive mineralization. It's quite significant.
And
And
that
it's
cutoff
continuous.
for the folks that don't really understand how cutoffs work, the cutoff is determined by the potential costs of operating a mine here, right? So that's why you use a cutoff like that is it's basically your cost of producing.
Exactly. Now, on top of that, when the cutoff grade is on a gold equivalence, we've got to say what is actually the recoverable metal that we're going to then sell. And that's always the key. Now, this is the entire resource. And we've been populating this, but this gives you a geographical sense why Cabasal is the hub. Okay, this mass of mineralization. This is going to go in the current model, it's going to go for decades. In the new model, 14 to 15, maybe to 20 years. We've got to see it because we're actually permitting this for 4.5 million tons. We'll start at 2.5, but we're going to actually have the permitting for 4.5 million tons. But as this goes through, it pays off the capex of the mine, goes for many, many years. All the other deposits, Saint Helena, that we know that CBC might become which is a gold and silver discovery, that could be another pit. They all don't have to carry the same initial economics of building a plant because the plant's already been paid off.
Right.
And this is the basis of a VMS belt. And these are why they go for decades. These are why they're very profitable things. And this is what we're working to replicate and to build in Brazil. And to have somebody like Bruce join the board who's built mines, and basically he's a company ready for that critical leadership at the board level to take it to the next stage as a mine build. It is really a fantastic opportunity that the board's been given.
And I hope it doesn't get lost on folks that economic situation when you have one project that is going to cover the building of the processing facility, it has a big impact on satellite deposits that could become future mines as well.
It changes everything. I mean, there's some discussions on I saw a good mate of mine, Merlin, chatting on the other day about the use of equivalents. That's a great debate. Upwards and downwards. I'm not going to sort of get into which is the right one. It was actually discussing St. Helena. St. Helena's a spoke. It's going to feed into the hub. But all that, look at that massive mineralization, 2 kilometers. Now, what I keep saying this, it's important that this body, it works so well because of the metallurgy is consistent. Now, we crush just to 200 microns, and we can say to everyone 200 microns is a very, very coarse. We then put it through a Nelson concentrator. I think it's the only bit of kit we have to import. That takes out 30% of the gold, which we then produce doré on site. We then float off the initial copper, and we produce. Then we do a cleaner. I think it's in the rougher stage, very small amount. We can actually manage the amount of sulfur that goes into our copper concentrate to suit clients, which is something a lot of companies can't do in such a long-term manner. But our recoveries, and I expect these to be as robust after the completion of our repeatability testing. 92.4% recovery for life of mine, 89.7% for gold. Silver is early 80s, mid 80s, silver. But everyone can, the people who watch the podcast, look at the YouTube page, go to the Twitter thing we put out this week, or X is called now. Such a stable flow. So simple. And this wasn't from one area. Repeatability. The first set of metallurgical testing, we took along the length of the deposit, and now we've done more infill of metallurgical testing, and it's just giving us a consistent result. But what I said at the very beginning of this journey in 2020 was all about risk. And the risk, you can minimize your risk, you can really maximize your equity returns. We knew about the metallurgy. We knew about the fantastic metallurgy in, I think it was September 2020, when we spoke with a guy called Jock Clark, who was the metallurgist, a Scotsman who lives in Brazil, who actually ran the plant. Said it's the best stuff you've ever seen. We then had guys, Mike Umpu and Phil Mackey at the Brains Trust of Falconbridge, which I call the Brains Trust of Falconbridge, for flotation and concentrates. And they just said, this is as good as you get. There's no comparison to this.
And for the viewer out there, that you don't have to be a metallurgist. There is evidence out there that gives you a comfort level as to what this simplified flow sheet means. And it's in the CapEx. If it was a complex process to get the metals out of the rock, you would have a much higher CapEx, because you have to put more into your flow sheet to get the metals out of the rock. So that's another good indicator for viewers out there that aren't metallurgists of the importance of the metallurgy. Can be looked at in the CapEx.
Absolutely. And it's the same for us at St. Helena. I'll chat with my team either today or tomorrow. I put out it's a fantastic photo. It was a small mill at St. Helena, and they've actually got the flotation cells there. And on the left, you've got the zinc floating off, and on the right, you've got the copper floating off. And it was, they only mined and focus on the massive sulfide. We're looking at the entire VMS system at St. Helena.
And that's part of what you have to do when you report, and you're trying to represent as best you can when you use these copper equivalent and equivalent grades, which was talked about on another program of a peer of mine, is that you're trying to represent as best you can a multi-metal deposit, and how that your audience out there of investors can understand as best you can represent in your news releases.
Well, this is what we try and present to people. And again, we've attracted some really interesting shareholders to our registry. Look at a project, how long term, and what is inside of the project. The project's going to go for 5 years. The project going to go for 10 years. And every now and then a project comes along. There's been Sabina, the SK Creek project is another good project. These things come along and they've got such long lifespans. And you think, okay, that's production. That is mining. That's going to, on its model, it will produce dividends for its shareholders. And what we see at Cavasal is exactly what we've seen in, say, in Tasmania, the great VMS belts of Canada that are now largely exhausted or mining at 1,000 meters depth, because their open pit dirt is exhausted 50 years ago. Our upside in Cavasal, that's going to feed into this plant. It's not 1,300 meters down below the pit, another ore body half a kilometer below the pit. It's the next ore body down half a kilometer down the road that's at surface, or the St. Helena, which is 8.5 kilometers down there, and all the ones in between it. It is an amazing opportunity to really look at the nascence of a mining belt and how people can actually grow along with it, the value of their investment.
It's quite an incredible story. And Gilbert, I actually talked to a couple of my industry friends, and some of the numbers I mentioned to them, they were kind of shocked and even don't believe, unbelievable, because they're not used to seeing these kind of economics these days. It's things have changed a lot over the last decade or two.
It's also the great mining camps were Canadian listed. They're largely mined out. It got some the very rich VMS Utakumpo, the open pit underground, that's exhausted, closed. But at the same time, with Cabasal, we've actually got the legislation where we can actually deliver results. We picked up the project within November 2022. Within 4 months, we had drill rigs, we were permitted, we had environmental permits to commence work. We're going for our preliminary license, which is your main license. I will be submitting that. We got the draft report. I think it was some 650 pages that the team in Brazil is going through and reading. So very much what we're looking at is, again, how long will this go for? How will you grow the asset? And I think I in today's market, in a jurisdiction where you can deploy your capital, I can't find a comparable. It's a fantastic opportunity.
Well, I could talk to you for hours about this stuff, Gilbert, and I'm sure we'll be talking in the future about some of this data. But for those that want to learn more, they can go to Verify, which is verify.com, and search for Meridian Mining. And they will find all of what we talked about today, plus more, on Verify.
It's actually easy. You can just go to meridianmining.co and click on the link.
Oh, so it's right on your website too. Perfect. So there you go, Meridian. And I always advise people to go to companies' websites to do their homework, because there's lots of good data on there to go through the news releases, and this helps in your assessing the your risk profile, and can help investors when they're talking to their financial advisors. But one indicator that I've always looked at, Gilbert, it's those that want to share as much information as possible, usually have a great story to talk about. And I think that's the case with you guys. No matter how you look at it, whether you look at it as the exploration potential, this could be an entire belt of VMS deposits, and that's the model. I'm not trying to be promotional. That is the model, the geological model of what happens with VMS deposits. They usually come in clusters, and you've got evidence that there's at least two there and probably more. And then you look at it as a development project, and you look at that indicator of the simple flow sheet is evidenced in your economic assessment by the low capex. So however one looks at this project, Cabasal, and it's quite exciting as exploration and development.
Yeah, look, I think it's interesting as a developer and explorer. Certainly what Meridian is, a developer and explorer, is it 60, whatever. In the current, for the last couple of quarters, developers have not been particularly sought after. But then this is the time where I invest. Is when do you invest? Do you invest at the peak or the trough? Well, as I see, I think the company's very much in that, what we talked about in the start of the podcast, the trough of the Lawson curve. And I'm hoping that the upside and generally everything will grow as we go forward.
Well, before I close it off, did you have any closing comments for us, Gilbert? You've certainly provided a lot of great information in this interview.
No, look, we wanted this tool for our investors and supporters. If anyone's got any inquiries, hit the info @ button. It comes to me. I'll of course answer it as quick as I can. And if someone wants a detailed discussion with me as your CEO, please, just hit it and we can arrange to have a call.
Awesome, Gilbert. I always like it when the guy who's running the ship wants to tell his story.
Okay. All right, Allan. Thanks again for letting me on today.
Okay, I'm going to close it off. You can unshare screen there if you could.
Okay.
I get the controls back. There you go, folks. Meridian just became a sponsor not too long ago, and I'm really glad they took me up on the offer because I am a big fan of copper and gold. I'm a big fan of projects that are moving in the development direction because of how badly the mining industry needs more mines out there to meet the demands that are coming. And the thing that I really like is I love to dig deeper into the data. Gilbert seems to be a similar data geek like me, and they do a great job with Verify and on their website of presenting what they're working on. It's a very exciting company. As always, I'm not making buying or selling recommendations, and it's important or price projections. It's important for you to do your homework, speak with your financial advisors, and also be aware that as a sponsor, they pay me a fee. But what I try to do is I try to help the company present the project and what they're working on to build the company, which are the elements of what I think leads to success in this business, whether you're a company or you're an investor. That's what I try to focus on. So do that homework, speak with your financial advisors, check out the company's website, check out this Verify, and I think you'll understand why I'm optimistic about the future of Meridian. On that note, have a great day.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Gilbert. We'll talk again soon, I imagine.
Of course we will. Okay, ciao.
Alrighty, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.